mountain and valley the world over are flowers and plants of simple beauty. Some hold a natural wonder, chemicals that soothe pain and inspire euphoria. At times, they've been hailed as a gift of heaven, but in the last century, they've been condemned as a scourge of man. Once, marijuana, cocaine, opium, ecstasy, LSD, even heroin were perfectly legal. Today, they compel a war on drugs. Did these plants and drugs change? Or did we?
Drugs are menacing our society.
It's like a 5-hour orgasm.
Used wisely, can produce the greatest ecstasy that man knows.
1914. The year sees the outbreak of the world's most savage war. From rat-infested trenches, stinking with dysentery, strong men weep. There are none of the blessings of plasma or penicillin, only the curse of machine guns, poison gas, and bayonets. The only mercy in this hell on earth comes from a flower, the Papaver somniferum, the sleep-inducing poppy. Its sap can be turned into the most powerful narcotics in the world: opium, morphine, and heroin. Drugs that kill pain and induce joy in the brain's neural centers. They also control digestion, body temperature, and breathing. The right dose lets the wounded sleep undisturbed and the dying smile in painless peace. But overuse creates a lethal physical addiction that results in suffering and death. Withdrawal from prolonged use results in agonizing pain. But across the Atlantic, civic and religious leaders fear these dangers and want narcotics banned. But other than a handful of state laws, there is no such thing as an illegal drug. America is a dope fiend's paradise.
Historians, various writers at the time, tried to figure out exactly how many people were addicted. And the number ranges anywhere from about 200,000 to 1 million people by the year 1900. But that was part of the scary thing. You didn't know for sure who might be addicted to morphine or opium. It might be an honored judge, a respected teacher, a trusted physician. Like alcohol, opiate addiction knew no boundaries. And the fact that people didn't actually know, there was no way of sort of counting an addict population because drugs had no regulation at the time, sort of added to the fear and hysteria that this nation was going to literally go to pot, because our leaders, our mothers, our pillars of society very well might be using drugs, and eventually this would lead to the downfall and debility of America.
Though condemned in 20th century America, the poppy was once honored as a gift of the gods. 6,000 years ago, ancient Babylonians called it the joy plant and drank the sap or dried it into cakes of opium that were eaten to enhance the pleasure of sex. Centuries later, Alexander the Great used it to conquer the world. He gave it to his army and carried the poppy to India, where it flourished in the subtropic sun and grew more potent.
Alexander the Great used it you have soldiers who are going to get foot weary and sore and tired, and also you can't sleep at night with the moaning of the thousands of wounded. Well, if the wounded are sleeping tight because they're doped up and the soldiers are marching longer because they can't feel their feet hurt, then you're going to have a more effective army.
Alexander's flower found its way to Roman gladiators. Like his army, they eat opium to fight fearlessly, and if mortally wounded, to die painlessly. Opium's dangers were documented as early as 150 AD, when the physician Galen warned that opium must be used sparingly, and added it was better to endure pain than become bound to the drug, a concept today called addiction. But in an era of kill or cure practices, like hacking off limbs, pulling out teeth by hand, leeching, scalding, cupping, and waging war with swords, opium was a miracle drug.
For centuries, opium has been the drug of mercy. Before painkillers were prevalent and arrived, before there was anesthesia, opium and all of its derivatives and all of its forms was commonly used by people throughout the Western world and the Eastern world as well, as a drug of a certain escape, as a drug to escape from pain, from reality.
But the flower of mercy was destined to become the suffering of millions, once the New World met the Old. 1492, Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand dispatched Columbus to find a sea route to India to bring back, among other things, opium. The supply, once furnished by Arab traders, ends with Arab expulsion from Spain, and the country is desperate for another source of the treasured painkiller. Columbus, of course, never reaches India or its opium. He does, however, find something else in the New World: tobacco, a commodity that changes the way opium reaches the brain.
Tobacco smoking started in China in the 1590s, 1600s, when the tobacco plant was brought from South America by traders, and the Chinese took to tobacco very swiftly and got to like it. Once they were used to tobacco smoking, it apparently was quite common to somehow put a tincture of opium with your tobacco shot, as it were. And then gradually this moved into taking of the pure drug through inhalation.
Smoking opium is a new way of consuming it. One breath sends the drug's chemical endorphins to the lungs and onto the brain. At the strike of a match, opium's joyful highs are more intense.
People smoked opium lying on their sides in these pipes that they had developed. And so opium dens and smoking became a social environment. It wasn't simply the taking of the drug. It wasn't simply the escape from reality, the euphoria that came with the drug. It was a euphoria that came amidst other people. And of course, it became extremely profitable, not only for those selling the opium, but for those running the dens.
Smoking opium is the ruin of China. By 1800, 2 centuries after the first opium arrives, 1/3 of the country is addicted. Though opium has been outlawed for 100 years, foreigners continue to sell it there. Most comes from British colonial plantations in India. A chest costs $2 to produce and sells for $10. The misery of China is a financial windfall for Britain.
It's about money. It's about huge quantities of money. These are the same people, the same culture, the same civilization that has made millions in the slave trade. Why should we believe that people who took millions of Africans and brought them to the New World would have any sensitivity whatsoever about the opium trade to the Orient, to the East? These are men, these are companies seeking profits. And if you can visit misery on someone you cannot see, then it's just fine. And the profits were enormous.
In defiance, China attempts to end the opium trade. Britain declares war.
And it was a major defeat for China, as Britain used the new technology of steamships and much better weapons, long-range guns and so on, and much more accurate rifles at this time. So the Chinese lost, and they were forced to sign a treaty in 1842. The Chinese continued to say opium should not be smoked by their own people. The British continued to sell it. The drugs trade, in fact, increased dramatically after the war.
Over the course of 6,000 years, opium evolved from a blessing into a curse. It started as dried sap people ate to kill pain and feel joy. But by the 17th century, an accident of history changes its route to the brain and lays the foundation for the world's first drug epidemic. Opium's curse isn't limited to China. In the 19th century, it yields another narcotic to a chemist looking for a way to make opium stronger. The result is the most powerful painkiller in the world, and the most addictive. The new narcotic will both bless America with the relief of pain and plague it with the worst epidemic of drug abuse in its young history.
Hooked, illegal drugs and how they got that way. We'll return in a moment.
He's got it. Yes! Hey, let's order a pizza. Make it a thin crust. You got it.
Hello?
Yeah, we'd like a large thin crust pizza.
Ralph?
Exactly. And you know what? Make it the way I like it. Loaded with mozzarella and toppings.
You know I hate when you do this.
Wonderful. And another thing, make it snappy because we're starving, right, boys?
Ralph.
Chop, chop.
For fresh baked pizza today, it's not delivery, it's DiGiorno.
Hey, great pizza, Ralph. We'll deliver.
That'd be me.
Introducing the new AutoZone Rewards Card. Something special just for AutoZone customers. It's simple. The more you shop at AutoZone, the more rewards you earn. So get your card today. It's our way of saying we're proud to have you as a customer. Get in the zone. AutoZone.
When storms shut down entire ports, we go out. When hurricanes ground the United States Navy, we go out. However, you also get the chance to save lives.
Don't believe it!
And there is no greater calling in the world than that.
If you've had a heart attack or have heart failure, inside this little device, you just might find 10,000 more kisses, snow, 200 more football wins. This is an implantable cardiac defibrillator, a device that's always there for you, close to your heart, with the power to restart it in case of sudden cardiac arrest, one of the nation's leading causes of death. ICDs aren't for everyone. They're proven effective in treating some heart rhythm disorders, but only your doctor can say if it's right for you. ICDs are implanted, and as with any surgery, there are potential risks, and physician follow-up is required. In rare instances, ICDs may not deliver appropriate therapy. An ICD could give you many more bedtime stories, tons of hugs, and one more thing, peace of mind. Call 1-866-950-5550 or visit whatsinside.com. Then talk to your doctor. An ICD is just a little thing, but it can make the biggest difference in your life.
Stay calm. We're gonna save you. Stop freaking out. Hop into the basket, one at a time.
Save some cabbage. Sign up for Comcast Digital Voice for just $39.95 a month, every month. With unlimited local and long distance plus voicemail. Because the less money you pay, the more you get to keep for yourself. Just call 1-888-COMCAST. Comcast Digital Voice. It's Comcastic.
As the leader in high-speed internet, Comcast knows broadband better than anyone. So Comcast Workplace gives your business speeds up to 8 megs, plus McAfee security and business email included. All backed by 24-hour tech support you can count on, day in and day out. When Comcast comes to work, everything simply works.
1967, the Six-Day War. Enemy MiG-17s are attacking Israeli troops. An ambitious fighter pilot intentionally loses his superiors and forces the MiGs into an epic air battle. MiG-17 versus Mirage 3. Don't miss an all-new episode, Dogfights of the Middle East. Friday nights at 10 on the History Channel.
The History Channel now returns to Hooked, illegal drugs and how they got that way.
They want your sweet, innocent girls to take to booze so they can be enticed into honky-tonks by slick-haired vultures who prey on the flower of American womanhood. I say alcohol must go.
In the decade before the Civil War, many believed that the most dangerous drug in America was alcohol. By 1851, 12 states had banned it, but people still drink. Alcoholism is common. A new drug, extracted from opium by a German named Friedrich Serturner, appears to cure alcoholism. The drug is morphine. Like opium, it kills pain and induces euphoria. But morphine is a better pain suppressant, 10 times the strength and requiring minuscule dosages.
In some cases, the doctors readily treated alcoholics with morphine, knowing that they may become addicted, because in their view, it was better to be addicted to morphine than to alcohol. Why? Well, an opium habitué did not blacken another man's eye, did not beat his wife, did not brawl in the streets. Wasn't the problem to society at that time that the alcoholic was. He was quiet, he was reclusive, and in some ways it seemed a better alternative than to have someone habituated to alcohol.
The 19th century is a time of incomplete scientific knowledge, when there are more blacksmiths than doctors, when state-of-the-art medicine is an operating room filled with sunlight, a room purposely located away from other patients so the screams of an operation are out of earshot, when a surgeon's tools are the same as a carpenter's, and medical school is a one-year course of study, and an illness is either amputated or medicated. Doctors thought little of morphine cravings.
People would have as much more pain probably then than we have now, in the sense that there were so few things you could do about various bodily ailments, and there's so little understanding of them. In fact, it came to a point where pain itself was seen as a disease by some physicians. So if you took care of the pain, you took care of the disease.
Pain or not, the fact is, morphine also kills. To his eternal sorrow, Frederic Serturner, the pharmacist who synthesized morphine, witnesses the death of his wife from an overdose. Horrified, he warns the world of its dangers, but the genie is out of the bottle. Morphine, once called God's own medicine, is the most addictive and deadly drug in the world. Though it kills pain, it also kills, and at the very least causes depression and misery from withdrawal. In spite of its dangers, there is no mechanism, no mass media to warn people of the clinical dangers of morphine and opium. There is also little interest. These are the best and only drugs of the 19th century. And morphine is just in time for the most savage war the world had ever seen, the American Civil War.
If you looked at a doctor's battlefield kit from the 1840s, you would find three basic kinds of tools. You would find butcher knives for cutting through meat, you would find saws for cutting through bone, and you would find wire cutters for cutting through tendons. If someone became injured on the battlefield, if they became shot in the leg, for example, the only real remedy was to amputate the leg. And since there was no anesthetic, a good doctor was a fast doctor. And what they would do is they would take the injured person, 6 or 8 people would hold them down, and then they would cut off the person's leg while the person was fully conscious. Morphine changed all of this. Morphine allowed doctors to kill pain, it allowed them to sedate the patients, and it allowed them to take the time to do real surgery rather than just amputations. It was referred to as GOM, God's own medicine, for the changes it brought in American medicine.
A drug's potency is increased by the way it reaches the central nervous system. Once opium is smoked instead of eaten, the high comes faster and the cravings become more intense. Morphine is at first administered directly to a wound or by blistering the skin. It is also taken orally, but that poses problems. It took 20 minutes to feel its effects, and doctors believed eating it caused cravings, an early term for addiction. To avoid that problem, doctors aimed to bypass the stomach and try the bloodstream. They do so with a revolutionary device, the hypodermic needle.
The introduction of the hypodermic syringe really gave people an opportunity to administer active compounds directly into the bloodstream. And that was an amazing piece of technology because it opened up a whole different way of viewing drugs and drug effects, and particularly introduced a route of administration that's very different from routes of administration that people had used in the past.
The hypodermic syringe in the late 1860s and 70s really came into its own, and every doctor would have it. In fact, it was like being a Western sheriff and having a hypodermic syringe to repel disease.
Injecting morphine into the bloodstream renders the drug's effects in seconds, but it also inaugurates an era of drug addiction.
The face of addiction did change with the introduction of hypodermic injection because the route of administration was more direct, putting drugs directly into the bloodstream. The effects were quite different. People experienced feelings of ecstasy, an intense high, and of course, along with that came an equally intense low.
Soon, needles and morphine are in tremendous demand in stores and mail-order catalogs.
Like morphine, hypodermic syringes were readily obtained by anyone who had a Sears and Roebuck's catalog or some other mail-order catalog. You could order morphine, opium, hypodermic syringes through the mail. They would arrive, in a discreet brown-wrapped envelope package. No one would know that you might have a problem with this, and it might indeed be something that you'd keep secret from your family.
Morphine and the hypodermic needle are the perfect accompaniment for every medicine cabinet and doctor's kit, and a blessing on the battlefields of the Civil War. But the mercy that the hypodermic needle and morphine bring to the war is undone in the peace that follows. A generation of veterans are now junkies. It is so prevalent, it came to be called the Army's disease.
With the Civil War, we had the horror of enormous numbers of young men being very wounded, and 100,000 with missing one or more limbs. Operations that were very painful to recover from. A lot of wounds. These people needed painkillers. And so what you wound up with is an epidemic of young men in the United States addicted to morphine.
Morphine ushers in the age of the hypodermic needle. Though blessings at first, morphine and hypodermic needles set the stage for the first American drug epidemic. What helps it along is a fundamental ignorance about addiction, and there is no such thing as an illegal drug. But soon the law will change, not because of a problem, but because of a prejudice.
Hooked, illegal drugs and how they got that way will return in a moment.
Egypt, 1967, the Six-Day War. Enemy MiG-17s are attacking Israeli troops. An ambitious fighter pilot intentionally loses his superiors and forces the MiGs into an epic air battle. MiG-17 versus Mirage 3. Don't miss an all-new episode, Dogfights of the Middle East. Friday nights at 10 on the History Channel.
Cotland Gardner is a real Geico customer, not an actor. So to help tell her story, we hired an actor.
My husband totaled our new SUV on my birthday.
But I still love him.
Less than 6 hours after the accident, the Geico claim adjuster was at my house.
Well, I put on some tangerine lip gloss and answered the door.
Geico service turned out to be the best birthday present I could ever want.
I was one lucky woman.
Geico. Real service, real savings.
You're on a mission to get an amazing new TV for the ultimate high-def football experience. Circuit City makes it simple.
I guess you're just what I need.
That's because we've got thousands of online customer reviews that rate the hot new stuff. And right now, get no interest for 24 months on all TVs, $4.99 and up. Plus, save on Sony, Samsung, Panasonic, Mitsubishi, and more. Only in Circuit City.
You're just what I needed.
Why do I like working here? I'm part of something big. I'm part of the future. I bring people together and send smiles, literally. Michael's my son. We have a good time together. Michael thinks my job is pretty cool. But what I like the most is that Verizon Wireless works as hard for me as I do for our customers. Through our tuition reimbursement program, I earn my certification. As I grow, the company grows. I am Diane Mundy, Verizon Wireless Project Engineer. It's very exciting to be part of something like this.
This is Jeff.
Check it out, Joe.
He likes things automatic. Everything from his wipers to his lights. That's why Jeff has a Fidelity Freedom Fund. It gives him a diversified mix of stocks and bonds. Automatically, of course. Call today to get a Freedom Fund for your IRA. Smart move.
Hey guys, are you sick of feeling fat and tired? Has your love life slowed down or even come to a screeching halt?
Introducing Nutrisystem for men.
I'm Dan Marino, and I lost 22 pounds on Nutrisystem.
Order today and get 4 full weeks of awesome food. Plus, you'll get an extra week of hearty meals free.
Hey, I'm at my playing weight now.
The secret to the system is the glycemic advantage, a science that separates good carbs from bad.
So now you can eat burgers, pasta, even pot roast. Get back in the game.
Since Nutrisystem, my sex life is excellent. I feel I'm back again. I feel like better than I did in high school.
About $10 a day gets you 4 full weeks of rib-sticking meals.
If you want to lose weight, pick up the phone and change your life.
I'm 40 years old. I'm in the best shape of my life.
You will lose weight.
Order our 4-week men's program and get an extra 7 breakfasts, lunches, dinners, and desserts. A full week of food and a $70 value absolutely free. So call now.
It was my worst nightmare. I was away on business and my wife called. Someone had broken into our house. We got lucky. They just wanted our things. What if the guy had still been there? I've never felt so helpless. I called ADT the very next day.
Don't take chances. Take control. A single system from ADT can help protect your home and loved ones from harm. And now save up to $200 on an ADT protection package. ADT's trained professionals help watch out for your home 24/7. And in case of an emergency, you can talk to ADT on the spot. Only ADT has a network of interconnected monitoring centers, helping provide protection from burglary, fire, and carbon monoxide. And only ADT gives you peace of mind with a theft protection guarantee. And you may even save up to 20% on your homeowner's insurance. So protect your loved ones now and save up to $200 on an ADT protection package.
Protecting my family is the best investment I ever made.
ADT, always there.
If we take my Milan, you can just plug that right in.
Cool.
Do you have directions to the meeting?
Yeah, they're right here. Mercury Milan has all the right stuff and the right size.
This is a lot cooler than our boss's car.
Don't tell her that.
Now lease Mercury Milan for just $208 a month and click on mercuryvehicles.com for more reasons why.
You've got to put Mercury on your list.
The History Channel now returns to Hooked, illegal drugs and how they got that way.
1875. America is no longer a cluster of 13 colonies reliant on an agrarian economy. It's an industrial nation of 39 states and 1 million people, united by telegraph and railroad that stretch from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The Constitution of the Founding Fathers is still the law of the land, but the land has been reshaped by a flood of immigrants. The immigrants, not mainstream American drug addicts, are what caused the laws to change.
It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution and the mix of cultures that we began to consider prohibiting unpopular drugs. And generally speaking, the drugs that were prohibited are drugs that are associated with aliens or racial minorities.
The first drug laws, enacted at the state and local level, are aimed at Mexicans in the Southwest, former African slaves who've moved to big cities, and perhaps the most foreign of all to America, the Chinese. They have come to San Francisco as a gateway to the West to build the railroads, but they immediately become the targets of exclusion laws and prejudice.
It became illegal to wear a ponytail down your back. It became illegal to carry water suspended by poles in the city of San Francisco. It became illegal to have a particular kind of laundry in the city. There were just lots of laws passed to harass and to get rid of the Chinese.
The original Chinatowns in the United States, particularly between about 1870 and maybe 1910, tended to be almost entirely male. You had enormous communities of lonely and frustrated immigrant men without women and without very much recreation of any other kind, so that you can imagine how rumors would spread. Their strange way of talking and their strange language and their big pigtails of hair that they still wore very often on the top of their head.
The Chinese bring with them the custom of smoking opium. But to the town fathers, opium is suspect, judged as sinister. The newspapers portray opium as a tool of seduction, a drug that stimulates uncontrollable sexual desires in women.
The reason they outlawed opium smoking in opium dens was because that was a Chinese custom, and they were afraid that Chinese men were luring white women to have sex in opium dens.
This was enormous fear that the Chinese would induce white women into white slavery and prostitution through the use of smoking opium.
But opium's link to sex was more likely to occur in China than Chinatown. The term Shanghaied referred to the experience of 19th century sailors who were knocked out with opium and robbed at houses of ill repute in one of the world's most nefarious opium cities, Shanghai. In San Francisco, fear overcomes tolerance. In 1876, the city passes the first law making a drug illegal when it bans opium smoking in Chinatown. With the exception of this very localized restriction, there is no such thing as an illegal drug on the national level. Opiates remain legal to the rest of the population, and the rest of the population is falling deeper into an abyss of drug addiction. One of the most widely used legal opiates is a drug called laudanum. Laudanum is taken for headaches, stomach aches, toothaches, fevers, sleep disorders, hangovers, menstrual pains, and other ailments. It was cheaper than beer, and within the means of the lowest paid worker. As the 19th century draws to a close, a full-fledged industry of cure-alls, tonics, and elixirs like laudanum emerges. They are called patent medicines because the formula is a secret and the ingredients are not listed.
Some of the patent medicines were up to 50% morphine by volume. And no matter what ails you, if you take something that's 50% morphine by volume, you're going to feel better. They were correct in their promise. They did make people feel better. Now, it made people feel better at a pretty tremendous price.
The price is addiction and death. People also took opiated cure-alls as recreational intoxicants.
Women were not permitted to drink publicly in any event. Public drinking was for men, so women tended to gravitate toward opium. It was much more popular among women than alcohol.
The typical opiate user in the 19th century was a middle-class, middle-aged, white woman living in the middle of the country. She used soothing syrups for her female problems or for cranky babies.
At a time when most people lived in rural areas and doctors are scarce, patent medicines are purchased through mail-order catalogs, snake oil salesmen, or at drugstores. After work, mothers weary from a long day dose their baby, then dose themselves to get a good night's sleep. As a result, a child might grow up semi-comatose and undernourished and in continual poor health. Reports of the times also indicate they are used for killing children by despairing mothers. Finally, Congress passes the Pure Food and Drug Act that requires the industry to label its ingredients.
Well, as a result of these regulations, most of the patent medicines went out of business immediately. Addiction in America dropped, and it dropped as a result of the fact that people became aware of what these drugs could do.
By the end of the 19th century, there is no such thing as an illegal drug, except for a handful of local laws against the smoking of opium by Chinese immigrants, and a federal law that requires a listing of ingredients in so-called patent medicines. Still, opium, morphine, and every other narcotic and stimulant are legal. But that will change. The temperance movement targets a ban on narcotics after a prize of war brings home the horror of addiction.
Hooked, illegal drugs and how they got that way will return in a moment.
This Monday, the new season continues of the acclaimed series Digging for the Truth as we take you to the plains of Mongolia to uncover the legend of Genghis Khan and his Mongol Empire.
If this was the largest land empire in the world, you have to wonder, where is it? What's left of it?
This week, join me as I explore a conquering force unlike anything the world has ever seen.
Is it Genghis Khan or Chinggis Khan? I've heard both.
It's Chinggis Khan. When, in the 18th century, when French scholars began studying him through Persian manuscripts, they misread his name.
There have been lots of empires over the past 800 years.
There's nothing quite like the Mongol Empire. The Roman Empire at its height was 1/4 the size of the Mongol Empire at its height. And this was, in terms of scale, off the map. And all of that was built within less than 70 years.
He didn't care about class, status, or blood ties. If you followed his way, he rewarded you. If you stood in his way, he destroyed you.
How was Chinggis Khan's army able to achieve military domination on such a grand scale? And what ultimately became the great empire of the Khans?
Okay, so who was Chinggis Khan? How are you?
Good, how are you doing? So welcome to Mongolia. Good to see you.
Can we go for a ride?
Okay, I want to give this thing a shot.
Follow us as we go beyond myth and legend to discover the real Chinggis Khan as Season 3 continues on Digging for the Truth, Mondays at 9, only on the History Channel.
Golden Globe winner for Best Actor, Forrest Whitaker. Now nominated for an Academy Award in one of the great performances of modern movie history. The Last King of Scotland, rated R, now playing everywhere.
Kids, we're going to visit the land of our ancestors.
Ireland?
No, credit card miles expired. Think more distant relatives. This is great! Hey, it's me, Cousin Bob! Going down.
We gotta switch to Capital One.
Get Capital One's no hassle rewards with no miles expiration, no earn caps, and no blackout dates. Check your mailbox.
See, kids, first class all the way. Something smells good.
Come dance in Aruba. Come dance in Aruba.
When I signed up for Vonage, I was able to keep my phone number, and then when I moved, I was able to take it with me.
Call quality is the utmost. It projects my business. And with Vonage, it's perfect.
Vonage and reliability, that just kind of goes hand in hand.
It's just $24.99 a month for unlimited local and long-distance calling, including free calls to Canada and Europe.
Get 1 month free. Call 1-888-830-4VON.
Vonage, a better way to phone for less.
How much do you pay when you buy a stock? Does the rate change depending on how often you trade or how much you have in your account? At TD Ameritrade, there's only one price for online stock trades, $9.99. No matter how often you trade, no matter how much money you have in your account. Straightforward pricing from TD Ameritrade. Independence is the spirit that drives America's most successful investors.
The hotter the hot, the colder the cold, the greater the demand, the more you need Duralast. Get the battery rated a consumer's best buy. Only at AutoZone.
The History Channel now returns to Hooked, illegal drugs and how they got that way.
1898. The Spanish-American War is best remembered for the battleship Maine and the Rough Riders, but it also shaped the first federal drug law. When America won the Philippine Islands, it became the steward of a population diseased with opium. So terrible is the problem that a newly arrived missionary named Charles Henry Brent begins a crusade to ban its sale.
The United States started the world anti-narcotic movement. Charles Henry Brent, who was the Episcopal Bishop of the Philippine Islands, wrote to President Roosevelt and said, why don't we have an international meeting at which the great powers dealing with opium and so on could come together and agree on how to control opium trade in the Far East. And this would also solve our opium smuggling problem in the Philippines.
The problem in the Philippines originates with the opium trade in China, where missionaries have turned a blind eye to the opium problem for 200 years.
It was a scurrilous business. There are even some sad ironies in the business. And the missionaries would actually take passage on these opium smuggling schooners with cases of Bibles.
Bishop Brent and other missionaries do not want the Philippines to become the next China. Their fight against opium in the Far East leads them to Washington, where they apply political power for what sermons across the country call a godly end, and lobby the Secretary of State and President to act. Their argument goes right to the ballot box.
Two American missionaries write a letter to the Secretary of State urging support for this convention that's to be held, and they send along with it a list of 33 Protestant missionary societies and a list of Protestant churches supporting this resolution that they wish. And they none too gently remind the Secretary of State that this represents more than half the population of the United States.
Teddy Roosevelt agrees to Bishop Brent's request to organize an international convention to end the opium trade. But the president is motivated by more than just a desire to end drug addiction in the Far East. Roosevelt wants to put America on high moral ground and compete with Britain as a world power. He also hopes to persuade China to open her vast market to America in return for help with the opium problem. China does, grateful for any help in stopping the influx of opium. The U.S. delegation meets in Shanghai, China, a city that is a virtual showcase of opium's devastation. The first international step has been taken to end the use of a drug. As Bishop Brent is solving the problem of opium addiction in the Far East, a new and more dangerous narcotic is born in Europe. Yet again, the search to conquer pain has unwittingly produced a lethal drug that will do more harm than good. In 1898, a German chemist derives a new alkaloid from opium. Like morphine, it suppresses pain, coughing, and appetite, depresses respiration, slows the heart, and induces euphoria. But what no one knows is that it has horrendous side effects. It causes the greatest physical dependence of any narcotic, infects the heart lining, and causes liver, kidney, and lung problems. Withdrawal is sheer agony, pain, insomnia, and vomiting. The drug is heroin.
Heroin was introduced by the Bayer Company in 1898 as a cough medicine. Its introduction as a cough medicine came at a very important time because in 1900, the leading causes of death were associated with coughing. That is pneumonia and tuberculosis. So to have a medicine that could allow you to sleep instead of just unproductively coughing all way was a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Heroin joins opium and morphine as America's most frequently used medicinal drug. It is sold in stores and mail-order catalogs. Sears and Roebuck packages heroin doses with a syringe, 2 needles, 2 vials, and a carrying case for $1.50. Doctors use it to cure morphine addicts. What they don't realize is that heroin becomes morphine after it metabolizes in the liver. There is another difference. Heroin is more deadly.
Heroin is a killer. It has a very narrow relationship between how much you need now to get high versus how much you need to shut down your brain and your heart and your lungs.
Heroin is a public health disaster. By 1913, heroin replaces morphine as the leading cause of admissions for narcotics problems to hospitals across the nation, and the leading drug of addiction in New York City. The lawful use of opium, morphine, and now heroin has turned the United States into a dope fiend's paradise. But that will change when the United States returns from Shanghai and enacts domestic legislation to control opiates in compliance with a treaty abolishing the opium trade. Ironically, the ban fails to help China. The habit is so ingrained in the culture. Opium is only eradicated after World War II, when the new communist government resorts to public executions, sometimes of entire families, to create a drug-free society. Unlike China, the United States is hoping to break the drug habit before it gets worse.
Hooked, illegal drugs and how they got that way will return in a moment.
The Quiznos is like stacked with a bunch of meat, and the Subway sandwiches. Like when you're in kindergarten and your mom throws some stuff together real quick.
A lot of meat. A lot of meat.
Magnifico? Is that Italian?
Try Quiznos' new Ultimate Italian. Toasty.
Golden Globe winner for Best Actor, Forest Whitaker. Now nominated for an Academy Award in one of the great performances of modern movie history. The Last King of Scotland. Rated R. Now playing everywhere.
I've never even seen this thing before. Did you see how fast I did that?
Like when things are real easy?
I'm like the king of that thing.
You're gonna love what we've done to retirement planning. It's called My Plan from Fidelity. Retirement planning made easy. Smart move.
Travelocity presents The Roaming Gnome, denouncer of travel myths. Our first myth, you never know how long a great deal will last.
Rubbish! Travelocity shows you how many seats are left, so you know when to pounce.
Myth 2, American appliances don't work in Europe.
Oh, grow up. Ah! Am I going to die?
Travelocity shows you when there's only a few seats left, so you don't miss out on a great deal. Travelocity, you'll never roam alone.
Inspired by Engineering an Empire, the History Channel, in association with the American Institute of Architects, challenged designers across America to envision the city of the future. Here's Chicago's winner from Urban Lab.
Our idea is to make Chicago a model city for growing its own water and recycling its own water.
Now vote for your design choice at History.com. And watch Engineering an Empire, Mondays at 9 on the History Channel. Brought to you by Infiniti, makers of the all-new 306 horsepower G design, beyond machine.
A legendary soldier on the run for survival.
He's here, so watch yourselves.
A survivor on a quest for revenge.
Might have been a man rode through here. I'd like to find him. You keep coming after me, you ain't gonna find nothing but carnage.
Liam Neeson, Pierce Brosnan, Seraphim Falls. Rated R. Coming to theaters.
Make a smooth approach. Make smooth contact with Electric Shave Pre-Shave Lotion. Stands up whiskers for up to a 52% closer shave. Electric Shave. Blade close, electric smooth.
Can an odor-free cream stand up to your back pain?
Benefit Aspercream.
Aspercream is clinically proven to knock out the pain with the maximum strength formula that's odor-free. Arthritis pain stopped?
Benefit Aspercream.
1967, the Six-Day War. Enemy MiG-17s are attacking Israeli troops. An ambitious fighter pilot intentionally loses his superiors and forces the MiGs into an epic air battle. MiG-17 versus Mirage 3. Don't miss an all-new episode, Dogfights of the Middle East. Friday nights at 10 on the History Channel. Own the show you're watching on DVD now. Call 1-800-708-1776 or visit shophistorychannel.com. Your source for all your History Channel favorites.
The History Channel now returns to Hooked, illegal drugs and how they got that way.
People were incredibly frustrated by the end of the 19th century. because there were great fears about how large the addict population really was. There were certainly sensational stories in all the newspapers which indicated that upper members of society were smoking hashish, were using opium, were shooting morphine. People were really beginning to look to the government to straighten the mess out, frankly. So legislation to control drugs became, at the time, the only answer.
Congress first reduced drug use by requiring manufacturers to label ingredients on drug products in 1906. But still, opiates are everywhere, from mail order to dose-happy doctors. Finally, in 1914, Congress debates a law to regulate opiate use and availability. Ironically, the law emerges out of compliance with an international treaty forged by Christian missionaries to ban the opium trade. What has long stood in the way of making a domestic law is the law itself. The Constitution guarantees the right to use whatever drug one wants, much to the despair of the anti-drug lobby.
What they really wanted to do was to prohibit drugs, but they knew they couldn't because a federal prohibition on drugs would be unconstitutional for at least two reasons. One was states' rights. The Constitution reserved that right, they believed, to the states. Another was the invasion of the personal space by the government. They believed that the government did not have the right to tell people what they could put into their own bodies.
Congressman Francis Burton Harrison engineers a way around the Constitution with drug regulation based on taxation.
For the first 140 years of our country included the right to ingest whatever chemicals you wished. Only in 1914 did that change, and the change is probably the most radical public policy change in the history of the United States.
The Harrison Tax Act is the first step in making drugs illegal nationwide. Under the new law, to use an opiate, you must be a patient. To sell or prescribe it, you must get a license and pay a tax. And not everyone is granted a license. It's at the government's discretion. The phrase illegal possession, a term unknown before the Harrison Act, becomes a part of the new language of drug law and a new precedent for drug enforcement agents to send people to jail.
What the government essentially did was it criminalized conduct of maybe 100 to 200,000 people who were using opiates prior to the passage of the Harrison Act. Within a few years after the passage of this supposedly revenue issue, Treasury agents, federal agents working with local police managed to shut down all of the drug clinics. The religious groups and the federal cops had no intention of letting drug users be viewed as patients. They were criminals. They were evil, immoral people. They had to be locked up.
The Harrison Act dramatically reduces the non-medical consumption of opiates by restricting access to them. Gone are mail-order catalogs because there's no confirmation, as required by law, that the opiate is used medicinally. Over time, the law, motivated by public opinion, evolves into outright prohibition. Heroin, in particular, is singled out.
Heroin was thought to cause people to commit crimes just because they took the heroin. Then, of course, there's the issue of people committing crimes to get heroin.
The Harrison Tax Act creates criminals out of users and addicts. But the most frequently arrested for violation of the new law controlling opiates are medical doctors. 10,000 have been arrested within the first 5 years of the law's passage. The basis for the arrests is the language in the law that states, opiates, quote, can only be prescribed in the due course of medical treatment. That phrase results in thousands of doctors going to jail. So controversial and unclear is the interpretation of that phrase, the law eventually ends up before the Supreme Court.
In the mid-1920s, the Supreme Court, in a case called Webb, said that the dispensation of these drugs to patients for maintenance purposes, that is, for maintaining addicts, was not the legitimate practice of medicine and therefore was not permitted by the Act. That's how prohibition, drug prohibition, began.
Heroin in the 1920s is stigmatized forever. By 1923, half of the inmates at the federal penitentiary at Leavenworth, Kansas, are jailed on federal drug violations. The Treasury Department, determined to rid society of heroin, lobbies Congress for tighter controls. In 1925, heroin is totally banned and permanently removed for medical use. Heroin is big business to underworld bosses. One of the most famous is Lucky Luciano, after he masterminds one of the richest heroin smuggling operations in history.
He begins to really set up the French connection. The opium is grown in Turkey. It's moved by the mafia to the Corsicans in Marseille, where the heroin processing plants are, and then imported into the United States.
The United States combats the problem by pressuring the governments of Turkey and France to crack down on heroin production. But the demand for heroin assures there will be a supply.
It's what we call the sausage effect. You squeeze one end of the sausage, it blows up at the other end. So they close down the French connection, but it moves to the Golden Triangle in Burma, and that begins to get attacked. And gradually, that's kind of worn down, and then it moves to Colombia. And they get one cartel in Colombia, and then they get another cartel in Colombia, and then it moves to Mexico. And it has even moved into our own country. So what you find is that you have this ongoing demand of millions of Americans, for whatever reason, willing to spend billions of dollars for these substances.
By 1956, contempt for heroin sparks laws for compulsory prison sentences. First-time offenders are sentenced to 2 to 5 years, second-timers 5 to 10, third-timers 10 to 20 years. But the law fails to stem the tide of heroin use. In 1970, heroin use skyrockets, though no one knows why. It even reaches American GIs in Vietnam. Faced with a drug crisis that could undermine the war and an explosion of drug use of LSD and marijuana, President Richard Nixon acts. He abolishes the old drug control system based on taxation and reinvents the drug laws. Dangerous drugs are banned outright or controlled for medical use. Next, he appoints John R. Bartels, head of the newly created Drug Enforcement Administration, to solve the problem.
And this had become a very big issue, and the president and the administration were deeply concerned that heroin was going to take out the American troops from Vietnam. And so the first thing that happened to the first drug czar, the first day in office, was he was put on an airplane and sent to Saigon. He didn't go to the streets of America, he went to Saigon. And the step that was taken, which was very dramatic, was what was dubbed Operation Golden Flow, which had to do with the first widespread use of urine testing. And what happened was that the administration developed a system that said, if you're going to leave Vietnam, before you come home, you're going to take a drug test. If you're positive, you will not be able to leave Vietnam. You will have to stay here and go through a rehab until you are clean.
Since the battles of Alexander, the fruits of the poppy have relieved the suffering of war. But today they are a cause of war, the war on drugs. What was once held sacred and hailed as miraculous is now taboo in a modern world that has seen the dark side of the awesome power of opium, morphine, and heroin.
Live like Genghis Khan. Fight like Genghis Khan.
I want to give this thing a shot.
We'll do whatever it takes to solve an age-long mystery.
What turned these nomadic hunters into world-conquering warriors?
No secret is too ancient when we go